Ranking Member for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to follow up on this because this exchange to me was extremely illuminating, because what we have here is the commissioner who's the head of the Food and Drug Administration, and then we get a drive-by spray of propaganda, disinformation, and ideological attacks. So let me try to sort some of this out, and maybe we'll help to illuminate why we have a Food and Drug Administration rather than leaving it to politicians in state legislatures or in Congress to make decisions based on ideological whim. But let's start with ivermectin, which I believe is an animal deworming agent that some people were advocating for use to treat COVID-19. Has this been approved as a form of treatment or a cure for COVID-19?
No, it has not, if I may. I should also point out, it also has benefit for humans with worms, which is a huge problem in Asia. So it actually won a Nobel Prize because it's an amazing drug both for animals and humans who have worms. And there was a good reason to think it may work in the case of COVID, and that's why, thankfully, the community, including the NIH, did a number of randomized clinical trials. There's just no benefit, and you know, that's true of most things that we try. There's nothing wrong with thinking it might work. It just didn't.
Well, what about hydroxychloroquine, which was another thing that was advocated?
Basically the same story. There was really exciting preliminary work in the laboratory that said hydroxychloroquine may have activity against COVID, so the randomized trials were done. Unfortunately, no benefit. Again, nothing wrong with thinking it may work and trying it out in a randomized trial, but then we have the data now, so that leads you to the conclusion. So we have not been able to grant an indication for those.
I mean, I'm aware of a lot of political attacks and criticism against the FDA, but I can never figure out the coherence of it. Sometimes they seem to be saying, get out of the way and just let anybody advocate whatever they want and use whatever they want without any testing and without the various protocols you go through. And then other times they attack you because you don't have enough authority to do the things that we would want you to do in order to make kids' cinnamon applesauce clean, for example. So let's take that one, which has caught my eye since we certainly ate a lot of cinnamon applesauce in our house when our kids were little. Let's see. Your FDA-regulated products are manufactured or handled at something like 275 or 280,000 different registered facilities across the land. So what keeps you from inspecting every private manufacturing facility that produces things like cinnamon applesauce or peanut butter?
Well, if I may, I'll try to do this very quickly. I think the best way to think about FDA in general is that we're referees. You all in Congress actually write the rule book, much like in any sport. It's the leadership that writes the rule book. We enact what's in the rule book. And in the case of food establishments, like most sports, the first line of defense are the players in the game, which is the industry that produces the products. And by and large, they do a great job, but sometimes they don't. And as referees, we have to be really wise about where we step in because we don't have an unlimited budget. So what keeps us from inspecting all 275,000? You don't have to be a brilliant mathematician to know how many people you'd have to have. But what we can do, for example, in food for children, is to have the manufacturers be required to do the testing, which is the way the drug system works. The manufacturers of drugs have to test every batch. And in the case of cinnamon and applesauce, if there had been mandatory testing, when it got imported into the U.S. from Ecuador, the stores that were selling it probably would have picked it up at that point.
And those kids ended up with lead poisoning, right?
Right. Lead poisoning is a very serious problem, as you know, and it causes chronic issues.
So you advocated mandatory testing. You would like us to give you that regulatory authority.
Yes.
And I do hope that's something that our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle would join us in. In the case of infant formula shortages, Last Congress, we passed a bipartisan bill to help address those shortages, but nearly 200 House Republicans voted against a second bill to give FDA resources to strengthen its oversight and inspection of facilities to prevent shortages like that from happening. So we can't have it both ways. If we want an effective, strong regulator, we've got to give them the authority and the resources to get the job done. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman.